FirstCoast.tv. We find ourselves here at the Mosquito Control Center in St. Johns County. And I find myself with...
I am Christhopher Bibbs, and I'm the Education Specialist with the Anastasia Mosquito Control District.
Okay. Chris, the reason I wanted to talk to you, because you're the man with the information, is the Zika virus stories are all over the news. We have the governor on TV, NPR was doing a thing on it this morning. CNN was talking about South Florida and the cases there. For us here in St. John County, what precautions and what should we be aware of, and what is the status of the Zika virus in our area?
So the main thing to be aware of right now is that Zika virus is not in our mosquitoes here in the county. So although some places like namely Miami-Dade are experiencing troubles, that is not necessarily the case in other counties. We're trying to keep it that way. There's only one mosquito associated with the disease, and that is called Aedes aegypti. We call it the yellow fever mosquito, and it's one that this area has a long history with. So it's one that we're familiar with. We have very good tabs on it.
So you have tabs on it?
Yes, and so for our case, we know that that mosquito is only in downtown St. Augustine, and even then not throughout the entire place. It's centered around like St. George, Spanish Street, south of, it's not as far as Cordova, it's south of Orange Street. So it's in a very narrow area. It's kind of near the Flagler area, but we've tested all the mosquitoes in those areas. We sent them to USDA labs and to state labs, and all of them come back negative. So we know that our mosquitoes do not have Zika, and we have very good tabs as far as the population. That being said, there is risk associated in other parts of the state. So people have family all over the state and sometimes out of country. And so the thing to keep aware of is that our risk of Zika here is not because the mosquito may end up here, or that those mosquitoes that have Zika in places like Miami may fly up this way. That's not the case at all. It's that humans going to an area experiencing Zika may get sick, come back here, and that is how your mosquitoes start having Zika. So right now, Miami-Dade County is one of those areas you have to be aware of, and particularly the downtown area of Miami. They've experienced more than 10 cases of locally transmitted Zika, and that is because they are in a port of call. There's lots of transient population, and the population is just extremely high also. They're tropical down there, and there's a lot of conditions that we only experience in part here. You know, we have a high transient population as well. We have lots of visitors and travelers, but our port of call is in Jacksonville, so we have more agencies involved with our issues up here. There's also that we're not really tropical up this way, so our mosquitoes obey a different pattern. The virus itself obeys a different pattern.
So here's a question. What's the symptoms that okay, first, how is the disease transmitted? We know one is the mosquito biting you. Mm-hmm. Is there any other way?
The mosquito can only get the virus at present from infected people.
Wow.
And so it really is a one-to-one cycle, mosquito to human, back to mosquito, and back to human. Okay. So this is why it's so important that people be aware of where they are traveling and to take proper precautions, which at this point it strongly emphasizes using repellents and wearing long sleeves, long pants when it's available to you. But outside of that, it is a bloodborne pathogen, and so there are risks associated with that. That is how the mosquito gives it to you. Just envision a flying dirty needle, as terrible as that is, but that is basically what a mosquito is. So it, feeds on somebody with the virus, and it ends up contaminated of sorts, and that's why it gets it. But this also means that blood transfusion is a possible risk. This also means that there have been issues with sexual contact.
That was another question I had.
They have found both men and women exhibiting symptoms have been able to transmit the virus to their partners.
Wow.
So they've also found that CDC has went ahead and concluded microcephaly is related enough to Zika that they cannot ignore clinical precautions and such to do with that. And so a lot of the medical testing is emphasizing pregnant women or women of childbearing age.
Well, for me as a layman, I see that the real threat is for women in the stage of pregnancy. Because if someone like me got bit by the mosquito, most likely the symptoms are like the flu. And after several days, I should be okay.
For most people, it won't even be as bad as the flu.
All right.
80% of cases will not have any symptoms at all,
Oh, wow.
which makes it very hard to catch all that is going on. And so some of what was caught in Miami is because when those first couple local transmitted cases popped up, they changed their testing protocol. They started going door to door in the affected areas and asking, please, let us test you. So then they started catching asymptomatic cases, which up to this point has been very difficult to detect. Because how do you localize a target area? And right now the governor has stated that we have the capacity to test a little over 6,000 people across the whole state. So you really have to tailor your resources per county. In the case of Miami, that is where they're pooling resources, but now they're finding some of these asymptomatic cases. For those 20% that do get some kind of symptoms, you can expect what we call febrile symptoms. You will just feel achy, joints will hurt. You'll probably not want to get out of bed, honestly. Okay. You'll have fever, you'll have nausea, you might even have some sort of rash, and the seems to be the characteristic symptom of Zika is conjunctivitis in combination with all these aspects. Okay. But you have to consider there are only so many ways the body can react to things, and so there might be a peculiar set of symptoms to do with this, but this doesn't mean there aren't other diseases that also cause that, including tick-borne things. So although a doctor, your clinician, might be suspicious that it could be Zika, it still needs to go to testing with the Department of Health to be conclusive, because West Nile virus could manifest that way. Ehrlichiosis, which is given by ticks, could also appear that way. So there are other things that certainly impact your health that appear a lot like Zika, and they have to rule those out first.
Okay. Now, tell me if this is true or false. I heard that a Zika or a mosquito, this type of mosquito, could breed inside a soda cap. There's my Eastern thing calling it soda, but a bottle of something, yeah, soft drink. If you threw the cap somewhere and it rained and that little cap filled up with water, that's enough water for a mosquito to lay its eggs or whatever.
Definitely. So this mosquito is a container breeding mosquito, and it only needs about 1 inch of water to live. And if that 1 inch is in a bottle cap, then that's all it needs. It can be in the ruts of truck beds, it can be in the furrows of a tarp that's not pulled tight. Wow. It can be in clogged rain gutters or in rain barrels that don't have screens. It can be in all kinds of things. So one of the major precautions to take with this is not only repellents, but for your local residents, you really have to spot check, what we call drain and cover. You're looking for things that hold water, things that shouldn't be there. Think toys and trash, things you can recycle like tires. Get rid of those things. Flip over buckets, and for things that you don't really want to flush out, like if you have a bird bath, a fountain, or plants that hold water but you can't go holding it upside down all the time, just make sure that you get clean water in it on a regular basis, preferably once a week. As long as that water is flushed out and clean, you'll be okay. But once that water's been sitting there for a couple weeks, the mosquitoes will find it. For everything else, mosquito control exists for a reason, and so we can educate you on specific things that may help with your area, and there are also some control options even available over the counter.
And what's your number here if someone had a question?
If people wanted to talk to us, you can either put in a service request online with us at www.amcdsjc.org, or you can call us in person, 904-471-3107. And you can either request service, get more info, or you can schedule events.
My last question, here's the $50,000 question. Any type of repellent that you might recommend?
Repellent recommendations are limited to EPA registered active ingredients. Now, people are familiar with DEET. We always push DEET as a gold standard, but DEET isn't the only thing available. There's also picaridin. You might see that in tick repellents. Picaridin works well against mosquitoes as well. There's something called IR3535. It is very similar to DEET, has very little smell, doesn't have the oily texture. A lot of people like IR3535. It also works well. There's also plant-based products registered by the EPA, particularly oil of lemon eucalyptus, a very bright yellow liquid, aromatic, but a lot of people don't mind the smell. Very different from DEET, but works very well. There's also some botanical things that have less information behind them, but testing by the University of Florida has shown them to work. Namely, soybean oil can last you up to 1 to 1.5, even 2 hours. Wow. So there are solutions out there that are relatively non-chemical. Soybean oil is just basically soybean oil. So those things do work as well. Just don't expect them to work quite the same or as long as with DEET. And of course, no matter what you pick up, always obey the label, apply according to the instructions, and always play safe.
Thank you so much. You are an encyclopedia of valuable information. Because, people, sometimes the media makes it sound like it's the zombie apocalypse, And I think one needs informed, well-educated people on the subject to tell you what it really is. And I thank you so much for that.
And if you'd like to see some mosquitoes, we brought some.
Yes. I want to video these guys right here. Oh my God. Look at them. This is a beauty. I've never had a pet mosquito.
So these are Aedes aegypti mosquitoes,
Mm-hmm.
and these are the ones responsible for the Zika virus. And
Wow.
although there may be other mosquitoes that may be suspected or suggested as being involved with Zika, this is currently the only mosquito in a global context being attributed to Zika virus. And we do treat and control this mosquito even in our laboratories here. We're always testing new products, new traps, new control methods, all kinds of things to see what we can keep using out in the field. And we use our applied research to adjust our operations on a yearly basis.
Mm.